I'm Amber Harper from the Burned In Teacher Podcast and a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Coming up on episode 152, I've got a great House of EdTech recommendation segment where we're going to talk about making learning virtual. I've got 2 Just Give It a Try stories, and we're going to get you ready for the House of EdTech 2020 Final Four. Strike up the band. Welcome to the House of EdTech podcast. I am your host, Chris Nesi. The House of EdTech explores how technology is changing the way teachers teach and the impact that technology is having in education. I discuss technology that is changing our classrooms and schools, and I share tools and tips that you can hear today and use tomorrow. You're going to hear the stories of teachers, leaders, and creators just like you. The purpose? Whether you use it or not, technology is changing the way you teach and how your students learn. Welcome back to the House of EdTech. I am so glad that you are here listening to this podcast and making me a part of your anytime, anywhere professional development. All right, let's get right into this because I got a jam-packed episode because this is a big month here in the month of March because it's all about March Madness and coming up at the beginning of April. I know I'm fast-forwarding a couple of episodes, but at the beginning of April, in fact, the 154th episode of the podcast, that's going to be the 2020 House of EdTech Final Four. But before we get to the Final Four, we need to start with the first 32. So that's what this episode is all about. So you're going to hear the entire bracket for this year's House of EdTech Final Four tournament. I'm going to go over how to vote, where to vote, and hey, you should vote on what you think should make it to the Final Four here in 2020. But first, as I release this episode today, March 8th, 2020, and really any 8th of the month, it's known, and I found this out recently, and I don't know how this is, but it's referred to as Podcast Review Day. The 8th of every month is hashtag PodRevDay, PodRevDay. And if you're listening to this the day it comes out or relatively close, March 8th is PodRev Day for the month of March. Now, this takes place every month on the 8th day, and the purpose is to be intentional? Yeah, we're going to make up words. Intentional about leaving ratings and reviews for podcasts that you listen to. Now, feedback from a podcast audience does one thing and one thing only. A rating and review will put gas in my tank. There's no such thing as your podcast helping the rankings in Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or Google Podcasts or social juice, none of that stuff. So if you're a podcaster and that's what you believe, you're wrong. And if you're rating and reviewing podcasts because podcasters tell you it helps them get discovered, that's wrong. The only thing it does is puts gas in the tank of the podcast host. So I'm not saying I'm running on empty, but every once in a while, I do like to ask and, find out what you think of the show in a more formal way, and a rating and review would certainly do that. But that's it. It's not going to help people discover the House of EdTech. More ratings won't help the show's ranking. And sure, people can see this if they discover the show on Apple Podcast, but it's mostly you patting a podcaster on the back. But this does go a long way for a podcaster who dedicates hours to prepare and create the content that you enjoy. Now, if you want to leave a rating and review for the House of EdTech, I'm not going to lie, I would be honored if you took an extra 30 to 90 seconds to show me and the podcast some love. Now, if you're not listening on Apple Podcasts and you're not listening on a platform where you can leave a rating and review, then send the host an email. Let them know what you think of the podcast. If you want to do that for this show, my email is feedback@chrisnesi.com. And I thank you in advance for taking the time to participate and share your thoughts about this podcast. Or I'm going to say thank you for any podcaster you decide to reach out to because they all appreciate that. What else about this? Oh, so I'm actually going to recommend, since Pod Rev Day is every month, maybe set a reminder. Mark the 8th of every month to go and do a rating and review for one podcast. Unless, of course, you're Stacy Lindis, then remind yourself to do 4 podcasts every month. Now, if you don't get that little bit of an inside joke, that's okay. That just means you're not listening to Podcast PD, which I co-host with AJ Bianco and Stacy, and you should so. You should so? You should be. So hit up podcastpd.com and, leave a rating and review for one podcast that you enjoy every month and connect with those podcasters and, just show the people who are creating content for you some love. And if you never show me any love, that's okay. I'm still going to make this show and you're still going to enjoy it. And let's get the House of Ed Tech recommendation going, shall we? Let's do that. All right, so for this episode's recommendation, I want to share with you something that I recently came across, and that is an ebook called 25 Ways to Use Screencastify with Google Apps. Now, this was published back on September 23rd, 2019. I will have a link to it in the show notes at chrisnessy.com/152. And this ebook from the Screencastify squad is all about different things that you can do with Screencastify. So pulling from the table of contents, it's going to show you how you can use Screencastify with things like Google Keep, Google Slides, Google Docs, Forms, Google Sites, Google Drawings, Maps, Tour Creator, Google Sheets, and even YouTube. So it goes through a bunch of items here, 25 different things that you can do with Screencastify and some of your favorite G Suite apps. Now, why am I sharing this now? 1, it's super cool. But 2, based on recent current events here in, the entire world, we have, certain health concerns. And a lot of talk around the United States and the world is how are we going to be able to provide for our students and continue to teach our students if it gets to a point where we're not able to go to school or schools are closed down for an extended period of time, much more than for a snow day or 2. We're talking for weeks at a time or months at a time. So something like Screencastify could prove to be very valuable for creating content for your students to be consuming content and to demonstrate learning and for you to still engage with your students. So that's one of the reasons that I'm sharing this. Something else that I also wanted to include in this segment for this episode was some news, and that is from both Google and Microsoft. And they are giving away enterprise conference tools due to the coronavirus. So Google announced on March 3rd that it would be rolling out free access to quote-unquote advanced features for Hangouts Meet to all G Suite and G Suite for Education customers globally through July 1st, 2020. That means organizations like maybe your school or district can host meetings with up to 250 participants, and you can live stream for up to 100,000 viewers within a single domain. And you can record and save the meetings to your Google Drive. So if you're that 4th grade teacher who has 900,000 students and you want to get 250 of them to participate in a Google Meet, you can now do that through July 1st, should you need to. Now for Microsoft, they're offering a free 6-month trial globally for premium tier offerings from Microsoft Teams. The tier was originally designed to enable hospitals, schools, and businesses in China to get up and running quickly on Microsoft Teams, and that tier is now available globally. However, when you try to sign up for it, you will be prompted to work with a Microsoft partner or a member of Microsoft's sales team to get it set up. So if you're a Microsoft school, that's just one hoop that you might need to jump through to use this technology with your students if you're out of school for any extended period of time. And as I'm recording this, on March 10th, Microsoft says it will also roll out a new update to the free version of Teams that will lift some restrictions on how users can be a part of a team and allow users to schedule video calls and conferences. Now, 2 other tools that I would recommend that you check out for live streaming or creating content would be StreamYard, which I've talked about on the House of Ed Tech before. StreamYard very simply allows you to live stream to YouTube, to Periscope, to Facebook, to LinkedIn, but if you want to live stream to, say, your class YouTube channel, you can certainly do that. And you can have one-way lecture or lessons, and you'd also be able to invite students to participate with you in a broadcast that you could do. And also Zoom.us. While I'm not a fan of it for podcasting, it is a nice tool for video conferencing. And whether you have the free plan or the paid plan, they might also be announcing, any day now that they're going to offer part of their technology for free. And that could certainly benefit you as a teacher. Now, if you have questions about how you can get the most out of virtual learning, just reach out to me. The email is feedback@chrisnessy.com. And if you need to do a one-on-one, you want to set up a Google Hangout and go over what your options might be or how to do something and how to really leverage some of this technology in what could potentially be a time of need, just reach out. Feedback@chrisnessy.com. And that's my EdTech recommendation. All right, it's now time to do the heavy lifting on this episode. And today I want to share with you the entire House of EdTech Final Four for 2020, the bracket. Now, I did reveal this prior to recording this episode in the Facebook group for the House of EdTech. Now, you might be saying, wait a second, there's a Facebook group for the House of EdTech? You're darn right there is. And you can get there by going to chrisnessy.com/Facebook. And we have a great community over there. And if you're not a part of it, why aren't you? When you're done listening, go on your phone, open up that Facebook app, go on your computer, go to chrisnessy.com/Facebook. And from time to time, I broadcast live in there, or I do like what I just did before this episode. I went in and I talked about the entire bracket and uploaded the completed bracket for people to check out before listening to it here on this episode. So that's one of the benefits. Now, anyway, the bracket. If you want to download the bracket, you're going to go to chrisnessy.com/152. Okay? If you want to vote each week, and I'm going to go over the dates and stuff, you're going to go to chrisnessy.com/Final42020. And that page on my website is going to be updated for the next few weeks with a link to the Google form that you can use to vote on the different matchups. Okay? The dates are, or really the way it's going to work is by voting will here's how this is going to work. I'm talking right to you. Between now and April 5th, up to each Friday, you'll be able to go to chrisnessy.com/Final42020, and I'll have a link to a Google form where you can vote. Voting will be open for a week at a time. So voting closes for each round every Friday. So that's March 13th, March 20th, 27th, and April 3rd. So all you need to remember is chrisnessy.com/152 and Final42020, where Final Four is spelled out. Okay? So that's the particulars. I'll repeat that, but let me open up the bracket and let's take a look at it and let's go over it. So the way I've designed this year in 2020, and I've done this before, and now there are other EdTech tournaments that are happening out on the internet, but this is the way I've decided to do it, and I was very, very intentional about how I designed this year. 32 teams, quote unquote, pieces of technology is way more manageable than, 64, which would be twice the work. And if you've listened to this podcast for any amount of time, I'm a little busy from time to time. So 32 pieces of software, 32 technologies in the 4 regions. And I was intentional about how I categorized it, because sometimes you'll see matchups where it's like, why would you put this piece of technology up against this piece of technology? Clearly, that's the more popular one, so you can kind of see what's going to win. So I created 4 regions. We have Region 1, the Create region. Region 2, Collaborate. Region 3, Communicate. And Region 4, Critical Thinking. So as best I could, with those themes in mind, I've filled in the start of the bracket with 32 pieces of technology. So let's start with the Create bracket. Matchup number 1, we have Tic Toc versus Biteable. Both apps do similar things. I recently did an entire episode on TikTok and TikTok in education, and I'm a really big fan of right now, consuming content on TikTok, and I'm still trying to figure out for myself how I can leverage TikTok as an educator. I will say, since I did that episode about TikTok, I'm kind of disappointed in what happens for teachers on TikTok. There's a lot of teachers trying to become quote unquote TikTok famous, and I'm seeing things that teachers are doing that I'm not liking. So I want to be even more intentional about how I can use it as a tool for teaching, not a tool for, let me ask my kids to slam their head against the board and try and go viral and be famous for doing something stupid. So that's not what I'm advocating for. Biteable is a new platform from the creators of Vine. So you know that there is something there in terms of technology and how it works, but that's the first matchup. Matchup number 2, S'more versus Canva. That's right, S'more versus Canva. 2 popular creation softwares, and let's see who wins. Next up in the Create region, we have Flipgrid versus Seesaw. 2 very popular tools, and let's see where your allegiances lie. We're all familiar with what Flipgrid and Seesaw do. Let's see who's more popular, I guess. I mean, that's what this whole thing is about, and it's just kind of fun to do here in the month of March. And the final matchup in the Create region is Wakelet versus Digo. 2 ways to curate content and share content, and you can do some creative things with both. Obviously, Wakelet has come on the scene strong in the last couple of years, and they're always adding new features, and you can do some interesting things with both. But let's move on to the Collaborate region. Here we have ways to collaborate and still kind of create. And first up, in the first matchup, we have WeVideo versus Shotcut. Both are web-based video editors, and I've done episodes where I've talked about WeVideo specifically, and I know I've mentioned Shotcut before as an alternative to Adobe Premiere Pro for video editing, and obviously they're both web-based. Next up, we have Class Dojo versus Remind, formerly Remind 101. I don't know why we still have to say that, but I just did. Next up, we have Book Creator versus Storyboard That. And to round out the Collaborate region, we have Powtoons versus Make Believe Comics. So there you go. The next region is the Communicate region. And here we have ways to communicate, as the bracket would say. So in our first matchup, we have Periscope versus YouTube Live. Matchup number 2, Blogger versus Weebly. Next matchup, Anchor versus Spreaker. 2 podcast creation platforms that are popular. Obviously, Anchor is very popular among a lot of educators who are creating podcasts because it's free. And Spreaker also has free options available. But let's see who can come out on top. And rounding out the Communicate region, we have Instagram and Snapchat. So that's the Communicate region. And moving into the final region, we have Critical Thinking, which of course is super important. But here we go. In the first matchup, we have Kahoot versus Gimkit. That's right, 2 popular game-based learning platforms to gamify studying and review and just overall assessment. So let's see who is the top dog there. In the next matchup, we have Quizlet versus Edpuzzle. 2 popular tools. They do different things, but obviously the goal is still the same. So let's see who is going to reign supreme there. And the next one, we have Insert Learning versus Quizzes. That's always fun to say. And in our last matchup, which might be the most controversial of all in the entire tournament, we have Nearpod squaring off against Pear Deck. So again, this is for fun, and ultimately it's, compared to the tools, which one is more popular. But certainly, I want to see what you think. So, I'm going to be tweeting about this. I hope you tweet about it using hashtag HoET Final 4, and that's the number 4. So definitely check out the show notes at chrisnessy.com/152 for the hashtag. But that's the field. I want to see, what you all think are the best tools out there. And I know, again, that it comes down to what you use, but maybe there's a tool on here that you would like to use, but you haven't used and you've heard good things, and maybe it's better than a tool you're using. And, again, I want to hear your thoughts. That's what it's all about here. So again, how does this work? you're going to go to chrisnessy.com/Final4 2020, and that's all lowercase letters. The only numbers are 2020, or you can go to chrisnessy.com/152. You'll be able to access the bracket. And again, voting is going to go on for a week, and voting closes each week on the round. So the first round, voting is open until March 13th. For the second round, voting will be open until March 20th. The third round until March 27th. And then April 3rd, we'll see who can get out of the Final Four into the championship. And I'll be talking much more about this in detail again on episode number 154. So that's going to come out on April 5th. And that is kind of where we're at. So again, I want to engage you. I want to see what you think. And, tag these companies, let them know who they're going to do battle against. And let's have some fun here in the month of March. And before we close out this episode, I am happy that I have not one, but two Just Give It a Try contributions. I thought about spreading it out and using one in this episode and one in the next episode, but I got them, so I want to use them. So first up, we have one of my pals in New Jersey, Mr. John Kerrigan. So take it away, John. What do you got for us?
Hi, my name is John, and I teach educational psychology at the Graduate School of Education. Recently, for my online class called How People Learn, I wanted to create an interesting module assignment that was different from a weekly discussion board. I used Kialo.com, Kialo, which allowed me to create a classroom debate. I had students author a reason for and a reason against intelligence testing in the classroom. Through Kialo.com, students were able to add their reason to each column, and they had to include research support as well as their own opinion. After allowing this to be up for 4 days, students then had to look at both columns and create a position based on what they had to say, what their classmates had to say, and research support. After this process, students went to stormboard.com, spelled out like storm, then board, and they created a chart that showed their point of view from the beginning of the assignment to the end of the assignment. And it was interesting to see their submissions, how some students went from pro-testing to anti-testing or vice versa, or had no change at all. So these websites were great for us to use in the online setting, and it helped me as a teacher see students' thought processes a lot better. And I definitely want to try it again.
Thank you for sharing that, John. Again, John shared that with me on Twitter. So I reached out and I said, hey, head over to chrisnessy.com/Flipgrid and let my audience know how that worked. So thank you, John, for sharing that with me so I can share it with you who's listening. And again, if you want to connect with John Kerrigan, he is at Kerrigan_John. That's KERRIGAN_John, JOHN. And the two sites that he used in this activity for debate and having kids kind of track their thinking were Kialo.com, KIALO.com, and stormboard.com, STORMBOARD.com. Thanks, John, for sharing that with the House of Ed Tech. Next up, we have Ryan. Ryan, what do you got for us?
Hi, everyone. My name is Ryan Gooch. I am the band director and athletic director at Owenworthy High School in Wisconsin. I wanted to put out a little plug for Flipgrid. As a band director, I've been trying to find a good way to do playing assessments. As a performance-based class, it's nice to be able to individually hear everybody's playing and be able to assess them that way. I started to use Google Classroom and have them upload videos from there, and it got to be a big hassle because some kids, when they would upload them from their phones, would take sometimes 30 minutes to upload. So after listening to a bunch of different podcasts, including House of Ed Tech, I decided to jump onto the Flipgrid bandwagon and give it a try, and so much easier to deal with. I highly recommend this for anything not only band related, music related, but something you can just give a quick response to. It's so easy to set up for your classroom. You just got to give them the link and it gets them right to the grid. It is fabulous, and I highly suggest it for anybody in the future. Thanks.
No, Ryan, thank you. And again, we got to speak earlier in the fall of this past school year, and I know that this was something that you were considering doing, so I'm glad to hear that you leveraged Flipgrid in your school and for your music students. And again, so many of us, we know how awesome Flipgrid is. Actually, we'll just see how awesome it is when it comes to the tournament. So make sure that you go and vote. If you want to connect with Ryan on social media, he is, of course, on Twitter, and his handle is BBT Trivia. So BBT and then the word trivia. Thank you to Ryan and John for contributing your Just Give It a Try story. And if you want to share something that you tried in your classroom, again, because that's what it's all about here, just give it a try. You know, technology isn't hard to use. So whether it was successful or you failed, share your story by going to chrisnessy.com/Flipgrid, and I'll be sure to share your story on a future episode of the podcast. Thanks for checking out this episode of the House of EdTech podcast. Thank you again to John and Ryan for submitting their Just Give It a Try stories. Let's keep the conversation going. I mentioned a lot of tools in this episode, and March is a pretty mad month where we're going to be talking a lot about a lot of the tools, here on the episodes. So let's keep the conversation going. I would love to connect with you and hear your thoughts on the information and the resources from this episode or any episode. So if you want to get the notes and everything for this one, go to chrisnessy.com/152. If you want to vote in the House of Ed Tech Final Four, go to chrisnessy.com/Final4 2020. And again, you'll see on that page all the different dates and when the different regions are open and when voting takes place. It's all on the website. And make sure you share this all on social media. The other way that you can share feedback with me about the podcast is by going to chrisnessy.com/feedback. Again, anything you want to share with me, I'm always happy to read and listen and all those wonderful things because, again, I say it every episode, thank you for listening. So, glad you're here. The other thing you can do, tell somebody else about the show. You listen this far, start sharing this bad boy on social media. Hashtag House of EdTech, at House of EdTech on Twitter, on Instagram. It's at House of EdTech on TikTok, although I'm not doing anything with that there, but it's there. The other thing you can do, if you'd like to, you could become an awesome supporter of the House of EdTech. The Awesome Supporter Program is powered by Patreon.com, and that allows a consumer of content like you to support a creator of content like me. Special thanks to all of my awesome supporters. That includes Anthony Arnaud of the New Teacher Podcast at newteacher.org, Eric Kurtz from Control-Alt-Achieve, find it at controlaltachieve.com, Dan Gallagher from GallagherTech.edublogs.org, Carlos Garza, that's right, Mr. G supports the podcast, and you can find him at aced.tech, where he does the Aced Tech podcast. Special thanks to Peggy George at pgeorge on Twitter, and Jen Giffen from Shooks and Giff the podcast. You could find that at shooksandgiff.com. Thanks to the OG awesome supporter, Mr. Jeff Herb. Connect with Jeff on Twitter. He is at Jeff Herb. Also, Mike Messner at TeacherMike72 on Twitter. And JP Prezavento from the Bits and Bytes of Education podcast, jpprez.com. And Kyle Wilcox at Level Up Ed Tech. If you want to be awesome, go to chrisnessy.com/awesome. The next episode of the podcast, that's going to be House of Ed Tech number 153, coming your way on March 22nd, 2020. Until next time, thanks for learning with me, and remember, using technology isn't difficult. Just give it a try.